You feel everything now, and almost none of it is yours. I am begging you to learn to feel nothing. And no, not numbness. Carl Jung has a name for the door all this weather walks through. You walk into a room and leave carrying a dread you did not bring. You call it your mood. It drowns the evening. By the end of this, you will know which feelings in you were ever yours. They told you this flooding was the gift, the proof you were finally deep. Carl Jung points to something harder. A life can drown in feeling that was never its own, and you have spent years broadcasting a weather you did not make. By the end of this, you will see why the flooding was never proof of depth, what edge you were never given, why so much of what moves through you is possession rather than sensing, and what your quietest self has been transmitting into every room you enter. Underneath every borrowed front, the needle has been trying to show you the one reading that was always yours. A weather you have not felt in so long you might not recognize it when it finally comes. So let us begin where you already live. You feel everything now. Every room announces itself before a word is spoken. You can stand in a doorway and read, in the set of someone's jaw and the temperature of the air, exactly how the last hour went in that house. They called this the gift, proof you had finally gone deep while the rest of the world stayed asleep on the surface. For a while you believed them, because the alternative was unbearable, that all this feeling might be costing you something instead of proving something. You have felt it in small, precise ways you never told anyone. You sit down at a table with people you have known for years. You reach for the old easy warmth, and your throat quietly closes, because some part of you has already read the room and knows the warmth would be a lie. You leave a 2-minute phone call and spend the next hour heavy for reasons you cannot name. You meet someone for 10 minutes and walk away wrung out, as though you had lifted something. This is the life the gift actually buys, and by now, you are so used to paying that you have stopped noticing the bill. Look at the cost honestly. A stranger's resentment rides home with you and sits down at your own table. You are tired in a way that has nothing to do with sleep, the specific exhaustion of a body that reads the pressure of every room it enters and files each reading under your own name. Picture it plainly. A person sitting very still, and where the heart should be there is a small brass barometer, its needle thrashing, because outside the window there are 4 different skies at once, and the instrument cannot tell which of those weathers is the one it is actually standing in. That is you, and you are not broken. You are a fine instrument reading pressure it was never built to own, signing your own name to every front that passes through. Now the correction that protects everything that follows, and I will say it once so it cannot be misheard. The body has its own crude fix for all this, which is to seal the instrument and quit reading the room at all. That fix has a name, numbness, and it never holds, because sealing the needle does nothing to the fronts still moving through you. It only takes away the one thing that could have told you they were there. The buried feeling keeps working underground and claws its way back up at 3 a.m, in the body, in a sudden rage at nothing. So sealing the instrument is not the way out of this. The way out starts by admitting something that will sound strange. So much of what you felt today, you cannot actually prove was yours. You have been told your porousness is depth, but a depth you cannot close behaves less like depth and more like a door left open in a wall that was supposed to have a house behind it. So the real question is no longer why you feel so much. It is who all this feeling belongs to and how it keeps getting in. Carl Jung has a precise name for that door. Jung reaches back for a phrase from anthropology and turns it on you. Participation mystique. He uses it for a state in which you cannot cleanly separate yourself from what you are bound to, where subject and object blur into a partial identity, so that another person's inner weather is lived from the inside as though it had always been your own, with no distance left to observe it across. In plainer words, you were never given an edge. There is no clean line where you end and the person across the table begins. There is a cruel symmetry in this. You can walk into a room and read within seconds the whole private map of everyone standing in it. The resentment folded into a smile, the grief someone is dressing up as ordinary tiredness, the thing the couple in the corner have quietly agreed never to say out loud. You are fluent in every interior but one. Ask what you yourself feel underneath all the accurate readings, and the page comes back blank. You have quietly suspected this is a flaw in your character. It is not. A boundary started forming in you and then stopped, usually early, usually in a house where safety depended on reading the mood of a larger person before that person had read it themselves. A child who must read the room to stay safe learns to dissolve their own outline into the room's. That skill kept you alive once. The trouble is that it never switched off, so now every room gets the same treatment, safe or not. There is a man I want you to hold in mind for the rest of this. He is 64 now, retired. For most of his working life, he drove a delivery route in and out of 100 doorways a day, never in one room long enough for it to close around him. At every family gathering, he keeps his coat on. Everyone jokes about it. He stands near the door with his keys already in his pocket, half turned toward the exit, and they call him restless, hard to sit with. He has called himself those things too, for decades. He does not yet know what the coat is really doing. The coat is the reflex of a body that has never once felt safe enough to take up space in a room. Something has happened to him without his consent. He walks into his son's house, and within 90 seconds his shoulders are climbing and a low irritation is rising, and he is certain it is his temper, his difficulty. But he did not manufacture that irritation. He walked through a door and picked up the unspoken pressure of a marriage under strain, the way his skin once picked up the weather off a loading dock, and he has no instrument that tells him the reading came from outside himself. Therefore, he does what you do. He calls the outside weather his own character, and he has done it so long he has no idea what his own still air even feels like. There is a quiet waiting on the far side of an edge like the one he never grew, the particular quiet a room has when the only weather in it is your own. But before you can trust that quiet, you have to see the next thing, because there is a world of difference between feeling a room and being taken hostage by it, and Jung draws that line with a scalpel. Jung draws a line through something you have always lived as a single experience. There is feeling, which is a function you exercise, a way of weighing what something is worth to you, of saying this matters and that does not. And there is affect, which works the other way around entirely. Affect is the thing that does you. It is an emotion that rises up, seizes the conscious self, and pushes it out of its own chair, so that for as long as the affect lasts, you are not the one at the controls. You know the difference from the inside, even if you have never had words for it. When you are feeling, you can look at a hard thing, let it matter to you, and still set your own cup down afterward, still yourself. Affect is the afternoon a wave of anger arrives 3 sizes too big for whatever set it off, rides you across the room, and puts words in your mouth that you will be apologizing for by evening. Afterward, you promise yourself you will stay calm next time. You mean it completely. Then next time the wave arrives exactly on schedule and takes you over again, because a thing that seizes you cannot be outpromised. That is the tell. Jung says it without any mysticism. A man is not master in his own house as long as his moods and emotions are running the place, as long as unconscious things are quietly making his decisions and calling them his. When affect has you, the other person disappears behind the charge that came off them, and the charge is what you become. Their anger walks into you and takes over the rooms for a while. Their dread borrows your chest and calls it home. So the honest sentence, the one almost no one will hand you, is that the sensitive person, so often praised for feeling nobly and without end, is in fact endlessly possessed. Not by anything dramatic or supernatural, possessed by other people's ordinary weather, moving through a life as an instrument that mistakes every passing front for its own private mood. Stand him in his son's kitchen once more. He looks like a short-tempered man about to say something sharp. Underneath, he is only reading the silent pressure of two people who love each other and are tired. And because he has no edge and no instrument, the reading floods straight into him and comes back out as his own foul mood. For 30 years he believed he was simply short-tempered around family. He has lived past 60 without once knowing what his own baseline feels like when a room holds no one but him. He is possessed, gently daily, and he calls the possession his personality. He can still remember the exact evening it cost him something. A birthday, the kitchen crowded, his son and his son's partner moving around each other with the careful politeness of two people mid-argument, the oven timer going off, and something in him snapping at the sound of it. A sharp word about the heat, the door, the mess, far louder than the moment had asked for. He watched the whole table go quiet around him. He drove home that night certain he had ruined the evening, promising himself, again, that he would be easier the next time. He never once suspected the heat had walked in with the argument he was standing inside of, rising off two tired people he loved. Which opens the real question, the one the softer versions of this idea only circle. If your instrument is always matching the last room it stood in, then what exactly is it broadcasting when it thinks no one is reading it? You know the particular quiet of a room 10 minutes after everyone has left. The cups going cold, the chairs at odd angles, the air still faintly charged the way a house stays tense after a raised voice, even once the voices are gone. It is tempting to hand that charge to tiredness, to something you ate. Underneath those easy explanations sits something steadier, a state your whole system keeps sliding back to beneath the noise, one that does not switch off just because the room emptied out. That returning state, the temperature underneath the day's reactions, is what actually runs a life. It sets the timing of things. It decides which intuitions you trust and which you override, what you drift toward and what you avoid a half second before you could explain why. That baseline is your broadcast. It goes out ahead of your words and arranges the room before you have decided anything. Consider what that baseline quietly decides on your behalf. It chooses, before you have consciously thought about it, who feels safe to sit beside and who makes something in your chest brace. It picks which invitations you accept and which you find a quiet reason to turn down. It sets the exact distance you keep from a new person in the first few seconds, long before they have said anything worth judging. All of it runs off the temperature underneath your thinking. So when that temperature has been set by everyone except you, the life it arranges will keep delivering you to the same kind of tension, the same kind of room, the same old dread arriving as if on a schedule until it starts to look like a pattern the world is pressing onto you from the outside. If you recognize yourself in this, take a second and do one small thing. In the comments, put the truest version of it into words. You can borrow mine if it fits. I have never known what my own weather is. Writing it down is the first time you get to read your own instrument instead of everyone else's. And it helps more than you would guess to see the comments fill with people who were never the only barometer in the room. But for the poorest person, the baseline was never theirs to set. It has been tuned by the last argument, the last phone call, the last person who needed something. When everyone leaves, you come home to the residue of theirs instead of your own still air, and you transmit that borrowed weather back out into the life it goes on to arrange. Here is where you will be sold the comforting lie. So let me take it off the table. There is a version of this idea that says the broadcast is a dial, that if you raise it high enough, the universe starts delivering, that some field rewards a clean signal with money and love and open parking spaces. That reading has nothing to do with Jung and everything to do with keeping you comfortable. It will keep you a barometer for another decade. Learning to feel nothing is not a technique for making the world hand you things. What Jung actually says is colder and more useful. Whatever you cannot make conscious inside yourself, you meet again outside as fate. The loop you call your bad luck in love, your type, the way it always seems to go for you, is very often an unconscious thing you have not yet separated from, returning to you dressed as destiny. The man in his coat did not have bad luck at family dinners for 40 years. He had one unread instrument and no idea the readings were never his to begin with. So when the broadcast finally quiets, the world does not suddenly start rewarding you. You simply stop mailing yourself the same weather over and over and calling its arrival fate. In that gap, something returns that no retreat and no ceremony ever gave you, which brings us to the thing this whole descent has been walking toward. If feeling nothing is not numbness and not a trick to bend the universe, then what is it? This is the thing the title has been pointing at the whole time. Feeling nothing is the withdrawal from participation mystique and the end of being possessed by affect. It is an edge where there was never an edge, and a still center that still holds feeling and is simply no longer seized by the feeling in the room. You keep all of your own life. What ends is the drowning in everyone else's. Set it in one concrete scene so it cannot stay an abstraction. Picture that same person standing at a graveside under gray light, weeping openly, and every tear on their face is their own. They feel the grief of the people pressed in around them, the whole of it, and they never once mistake a drop of it for theirs, and they carry none of it home. That is the entire thing. Someone who can still be moved all the way through and stays wholly themselves while it happens. Nothing borrowed. Nothing that wandered in from the next room and started answering to your name. So what does that still center actually feel like from the inside, if not deadness? It feels like standing in an open field while weather moves across the whole sky in front of you, rain in the distance, sun breaking somewhere off to the left, and none of it asking you to become it. You can see the whole front coming, stay dry until it reaches you, feel it honestly when it arrives, and let it move on when it goes. Jung points at an old idea for exactly this: the art of letting things happen in the psyche, action through inaction, the letting go of the need to seize and fix and rescue every charge that moves through a room. It only sounds like passivity. In truth, it asks the hardest kind of restraint there is, the discipline of feeling something fully and still leaving it where it belongs, in the person it came from. So the man in his coat, on some ordinary evening, could learn to stand in his son's kitchen and feel the pressure of that tired marriage move through the room, register it clearly, and know with total certainty that it is not his to carry. He could feel the whole weather of the house and stay dry inside his own skin. He would still love them. He would love them better, because for the first time, he would be meeting the actual people in front of him rather than the weather he used to mistake them for. This is where the honest promise lands, and it is smaller and truer than the one you were sold. Nothing is delivered. No abundance arrives. What comes back is an edge, and behind the edge, a quiet. The strangest part of that quiet is how much of your own life it turns out to contain, once the room's weather is no longer roaring through it. Be clear about what this does not do, because the gentler versions of the promise always lie right here. The edge does not fix the people on the far side of it. The son's marriage stays as tired as it was. The old griefs in your own life stay exactly as heavy as they were. A hard conversation is still hard, and a person who hurt you still did. You stop mistaking their weather for yours, so the genuinely difficult things in your life shrink back to their real size, instead of the swollen size they reach when you carry everyone's version at once. What is left to feel is only ever yours, and it weighs far less than the whole room's ever did. So in that quiet, once you finally stop absorbing everyone, something you had long since stopped noticing begins to move again. The first thing that comes back is your own feeling, at its own true volume, with your own signature on it. Your own sadness, distinct from the sadness you picked up on the train. Your own anger, which turns out to be quieter and more specific than the borrowed rage you carried for years. your own affection, no longer diluted through the exhaustion of managing everyone's mood. This is what Jung means by the withdrawal of projection, the beginning of what he calls individuation, which arrives with none of the fireworks the word promises and looks instead like the slow recovery of a self with an edge. The immense energy you were spending, without ever knowing it, on reading and absorbing and carrying, comes back home to its own center. You are no longer a porous observer of a life you were always too tired to actually live. It comes back in small, almost comic ways at first. You realize you are hungry, and the hunger is plainly your own, arriving whether or not anyone else at the table has decided to eat. You feel bored, simply bored, and the boredom is a fact about you instead of a crime to cover. You find you have a preference about the restaurant, the weekend, the song left playing in the car, and the preference is just there, needing no one's permission and no long defense. These are tiny sovereignties, and to someone who spent decades tuned to everyone else, they arrive like the first coins of a currency they had been told they would never be allowed to hold. Return one last time to the man. It is another family dinner, years into the slow work of learning where he ends. The old pressure rises in the room the way it always did. Two people he loves, tired, an argument folded up under the surface. He feels it arrive. His shoulders start their old climb. And then, for the first time in his life, he understands that the weather in the room is theirs, that they are allowed to carry it, that it is not a summons for him to fix or to flee. He thinks in that moment of something one of the grandchildren asked him a while back. Too young to know it was a question no adult was supposed to say out loud, the child had looked up at him in the hallway and wanted to know why Grandpa never takes his coat off at his own family's house. He had laughed it off at the time. He had no answer then. He has one now, though he will never need to say it aloud. The coat was the last thing his body was still doing to stay ready to leave a room that was never going to hurt him. He does something his family has never once seen him do. He takes his coat off, he hangs it over the back of the chair, he sits all the way down, and he stays, and he is still there when the room has cleared, feeling nothing that came from across the table, feeling instead, for perhaps the first time, the plain and unremarkable weather of being only himself. He drives home that night carrying nothing that was not already his. That silence he had spent a lifetime afraid of turned out to be the first privacy his inner life was ever given. The exhaustion you have carried was the sound of a boundary that never finished forming, doing the work of a wall it was never built to be, for years longer than anyone should be asked to. If this landed as recognition and not as comfort, then you already know the difference the work makes. You are not broken for being tired, and you will not be healed simply by going quiet. You are learning, maybe late, exactly where you end. One last thing, and then I will leave you with it. If any part of this felt like being seen rather than sold to, leave a different mark than you left before. Tell the comments where you actually are in this now. Use mine as a starting point if you like. I am learning where I actually end. That is enough to begin with, and the edge only grows from here. The needle you have watched thrash your whole life was never broken. It was only reading a sky it was never asked to answer for. When the borrowed fronts finish moving through, it settles and shows you the one quiet weather that was yours all along. You do not have to go dark to reach it. You only have to learn, room by room, where you end, until you can walk out of any of them carrying nothing that was not yours to begin with.
Empaths aren't broken, they're alchemists in progress. The Alchemist's Path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com.